Greetings all, Veranda601 here. Those of you who have seen my tour of Demo 401 of the Titanic Honor and Glory video game that I released on March 5th, you may have noted a couple of errors there, despite having been quite familiar with this ship and the Olympic-class ships in general for a long time. They're big ships. They're 45,000 tons, and they're 882 feet long and 92 feet wide, and they're basically the same size as an Iowa. So they're big, and having been on an Iowa, I can tell you that it takes you many hours to get through many spaces, most of the spaces that you can get to. So you're going to make some mistakes. So I've made a couple of mistakes in my recent video, and one of them was an omission owing to my own incompetence, that I could not find the chain locker. We're here forward in the crew companionway on E deck, and this is the #1 cargo hatch. We went to the windlass room and we saw the equipment that is there to actuate the anchor chains and mooring lines. However, here we get into the trimmer's quarters, I believe this is. You can see that we have bunks here underneath the forecastle deck. This is underneath the forward section of the ship, the first open deck space that you have aboard Titanic. That is the forecastle deck, and we are underneath there on E deck. And this space is the trimmer's quarters, right? Underneath the trimmer's quarters, though, there is a hatch, which you will find right here. And this hatch is the chain locker, or the top of the chain locker. This would be F deck. And if I look on my booklet of general plans, I see the chain locker. So the entrance is this E deck hatch. At least one of the entrances. The entrance that we can access is this E deck hatch down to F deck, which is where we see the top of the massive anchor chain. And you can see here's the hawse pipe that goes all the way up to the forecastle and to the anchor. You can even see little hints of daylight through that pipe. That goes all the way up to C deck, which is the level of the whale deck. The forecastle technically is B deck, but we can call that its own platform because it's not a full deck. And this is where all the anchor chain lives. This would be an incredibly loud, dirty, and dangerous place to be. If you were going to be moving the anchors, you had better check that nobody was in here, first of all, because this chain is going to whip around, particularly if you are letting the anchor back in, but even letting the anchor out, it's going to whip all over the place. These very small partitions here, these steel barriers, they're not going to be long for this world. There's going to be dents and big gouges taken out of all of this, but this is where the chain is stored for the anchor, so this is therefore the chain locker. Again, I will reference the Battleship New Jersey YouTube channel. They have put up several videos of spaces like this aboard USS New Jersey. In fact, they did put up one of the chain locker on New Jersey, and they go down to the bottom of the chain locker. We cannot go to the bottom of the chain locker here on Titanic, but you can surmise how deep this is. You can see the deck down there at the bottom of the chain locker. My booklet of general plans shows the chain locker on F deck. It shows it on G deck. It shows it on the orlop deck, but it does not show it on the first platform, which would be the second orlop deck, or the lower orlop deck. There is no second platform, though, because the tank top is a full-length deck. So the lower orlop deck, or deck 9A, as far as it's called on many booklets of general plans, that is simply a platform. So I would call that first platform. It features #1 hatch. It features the peak tank here in the bow below this space, but it doesn't really feature anything else. So that is the extent of the chain locker here. And again, to get to the chain locker, we went to E deck up to this space, which is, if we can get out of it, which is a little bit difficult to do, this is the berthing compartment for the trimmers. The trimmers were the people who worked in the coal bunkers to keep the coal distributed relatively evenly so that the ship could maintain an even keel, as well as to keep the coal in ready reach of the stokers, the firemen, who were shoveling the stuff into the boilers. So E-deck forward in the crew companionway, just forward of number 1 cargo hatch, which is this space here, this void space, trimmer's quarters. There's a hatch in the floor, which leads you to the chain locker. So that is that bit of what we missed. Another area that we need to take a second look at is back here on A deck, part of the first class promenade. Here is the mainmast, and then the aft superstructure. We have this machinery space here for ventilation. We took a look at this briefly. However, on either side of this, port and starboard, we have this space. I had erroneously called this the reading and writing room. However, as you can see here from the labeling, this is the Veranda Cafe and Palm Court. We go inside through a small loading screen because it also includes the first class smoking room and the reading and writing room proper, as well as the aft grand staircase. You will see that once we finish loading, here we go. This is the Veranda Cafe. The cafe is served by this bar area, as you can see. The revolving door leading to the first class smoking room. And this side of the bar. However, if we go through here, you will see the crew entrance to the bar area, as well as the cut through to the starboard side of the Palm Court and Veranda Cafe, not the reading and writing room. So again, just to clarify on all of this. First class smoking room, Palm Court / Veranda Cafe, bar area servicing both spaces. And then as we go forward on the port side, aft grand staircase, first class promenade, port side, A deck, through another revolving door. And this is the reading and writing room / first class lounge area. And this is the reading and writing room proper. You can tell this because we have desks with pockets in the upper works here on the desks, which of course would probably be holding pens and stationery and things like that so that you could write a postcard back home. This is not, however, the library, which is interesting. I would expect a reading and writing room to include a library, but no, it does not, at least not in this case. But this is the reading and writing room. And again, this was meant to be effectively an equivalent female space to what the first class smoking room was in terms of being a male-dominated space. Segregation of the sexes as well as segregation of the socioeconomic classes was something that played a pivotal role in the passenger spaces on this ship. However, there were, of course, exceptions to the rule, and in first class, generally speaking, if people were rich enough, they could do whatever they wanted, including go in other areas of the ship that passengers really weren't meant to be in the first place. But this is the reading and writing room proper. And again, heading forward of here, we have the forward grand staircase, which is here. So these are all the areas that you're used to seeing. Again, we're on A deck, so this is the stereotypical ornamental clock, honor and glory, crowning time. But heading back, you will see, through the revolving door, the reading and writing room, the first class lounge, and then through this space, which is not accessible here on the starboard side, but is accessible on the port side, we have the first class promenade on A deck, expansion joint here, the aft grand stairs with our little electric space heater, the first class smoking room, And then on either side, port or starboard, we are ports here through the revolving door into the Veranda Cafe and Palm Court. Why is this called a palm court? Well, I guess these leaves kind of look like palm leaves, even though they're actually ivy, but there's a palm tree right there. Is it real? Probably. But that is what this space is. It is not the reading and writing room, as I had said previously. I did correct it in the initial video, but most of you probably won't get that far in it, so there it is. Something else that I insisted on being consistently wrong about in my video, cargo hatches. Here we are looking forward from A deck, first class promenade. Where are we here? This is the forecastle deck. This is number 1 cargo hatch. This is the area above the crew quarters and ultimately leading down just slightly more forward to this space to the windlass room, as well as down eventually to the chain locker that we took a look at earlier in this video. This is number 2 cargo hatch. And behind this is number 3 cargo hatch. If we go aft here on A deck, we have to walk about 700 some odd feet aft here so that we can get a view of this area. So this will take a little while, passing midships now. Let's take a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship here on the beam work there on the roof, the boat deck area right here. Cargo cranes, mainmast. But back here, as far aft as we can go on A deck, we have the cargo hatches back here, number 4 and number 5. I insisted on calling this cargo hatch back here, the number 5 cargo hatch, the number 6 cargo hatch. There is no such thing as the number 6 cargo hatch here on Titanic. I don't believe Olympic or Britannic had a number 6 cargo hatch either. So that is something that is entirely my own invention. And, well, it's something that I absolutely need to correct. So, yeah, there are 5 external primary cargo hatches on the Olympic-class ships. And I will show you my confusion here once we're able to get into the area of Scotland Road, because we were looking for the engineering spaces. Back into the Veranda Cafe and Palm Court and the first class smoking room. Aft ground stairs. We're on A deck, B deck, C deck. Tangent. Barbershop. Here's the barbershop. Cool. C deck is as far down as we can go on the aft ground stairs, so we've got to go back forward. C73 we passed. C55, and then D deck, which is the main dining saloon for the first class passengers, which is another space that we didn't quite get to see, but similar to the second class dining room, except it's a bit bigger and it's a little bit more ornate. But again, similar sorts of things in terms of place settings, things like that. There's your menu. Totally legible. If you want to pause the video and take a look at what this says, you can. Not bad. Not bad at all. Lunch menu, of course. Actually, that's April 14th's menu. Portentous state there. However, continuing to go down a little bit more. E deck. Scotland Road. Right. Stewart's Lab. So that means that we have got the boiler rooms coming up here. So boiler rooms 5 and 6 are accessible. This is boiler room 6. So if we head aft, you're going to see the genesis of my confusion. So boiler rooms 4 and 3, 3 and 2, and then boiler room 1. This area is the engineer's mess, or crew's mess, and then engineer's mess is actually adjacent to the reciprocating engine room. But back here, through this watertight bulkhead, there is the reciprocating engine room that we saw previously. No big emissions or errors to correct in here, other than some of you might be confused at how I described the passage of the steam through the engines. Obviously, you have got the 6 boiler rooms that are generating steam pressure, and those boilers are passing the steam to the reciprocating engines first and then to the turbine engine. The reciprocating engines take an inlet charge of steam 4 times. They take it to the high pressure cylinder, and then the high pressure cylinder exhausts it to 2 intermediate pressure cylinders, and then to 1 low pressure cylinder. So that's the triple expansion part of these engines. You have 1 expansion in the high pressure cylinder, you have 2 expansions in 2 intermediate pressure cylinders, and then you have a 3rd expansion in the low pressure cylinder. So those intermediate cylinders are duplicated, but there's 1 high pressure and 1 low pressure cylinder. So they are triple expansion despite there being 4 cylinders. Once the steam goes through the low pressure cylinder, it is sent via these tremendous pipes through this bulkhead right here to the turbine engine. Otherwise, everything else is there. So 4 cylinders, but 3 expansion stages. Just one of those expansion stages is duplicated. Pass through this watertight bulkhead into the turbine engine room, and again, you see more of the same here. Turbine engine here. This is driven by the low pressure steam from the exhaust of the reciprocating engines, blowing over turbine blades. And this is as low as we can get in this space. But there you go. You can't go any higher in this space, but you can see the turbine engine room has its own fiddly grate all the way up top there, and you can see that we have got a couple of stacks going up and out. So plenty of ventilation, and of course there is an escape route for crew in this area. You also see that we have got this great work here for more cargo, because we go through this bulkhead. This is the port side of the ship. This is the port side 3rd class gangway, not the starboard side. We're on the port side of the ship. Another minor correction to make. Through another watertight bulkhead. This is number 4 cargo hatch, because you can see the aft superstructure of the B deck and A deck area. And then this is number 5 cargo hatch, the aftmost cargo hatch. And then you're back here, and you're underneath the poop deck, and you can see how we're underneath the counterstern here because the hull has started to cut in rather severely toward the center line of the ship. If we head up, we'll go up on the starboard side. When we go out, we are underneath the poop deck here on the C deck, well deck aft here. So we were underneath the counterstern. And if you go up top here, you can kind of get a sense of how the ship cuts in, because we are actually outboard of where the main hull plates are right now. And if we sit here amidships, we're basically directly over the center prop, but the 2 wing props are way out here and beyond, because it's the geometry of the stern structure. But the 2 cargo hatches that are visible once we get there, here and there, these are cargo hatches number 4 and number 5. This mythical number 6 cargo hatch that I was talking about does not actually exist. I've confirmed this on the general plans as well as several models that I have, including one that I built, so I should know this, but I didn't for whatever reason. There are 5 principal cargo hatches here, accessible from the main deck level on Titanic, and now we've put that right. Something else that absolutely injected some aspect of bias into my assessment of Titanic here has been my previous experience here with the final edition of the Olympic class liner, this HMHS Britannic. This was the third and final Olympic class ship built, as you can see here, pictured in 1916. Titanic lost in 1912, Olympic launched in 1911. It continued in service through 1935. Britannic launched in 1915, lost in 1916. She is a warship through and through. Olympic herself ended up serving as a warship as well, and Olympic actually seeing illustrious World War I service. Britannic, though, lost due to a mine strike off of Greece in the Kea Channel, where we are now, in November of 1916. This game here is Britannic, patroness of the Mediterranean, also developed by the folks at Titanic Honor and Glory. You can see that a lot of the Titanic model is also here represented on Britannic, and you can see that we have got ourselves a lot of the same details here visible on Britannic as we had on Titanic. Some differences. On Titanic, we don't have this stairwell, for example, going up to this auxiliary compass platform that we've got over the wheelhouse here on Britannic. Also, you can hear that we have additional sound effects that are not evident on Titanic. We've got some additional vents, these downdraft active vents, as well as the standard passive vents that were opposable by those handles there. Here are the number 2 and number 3 cargo hatches. Here's the number 1 cargo hatch over what was still the officers' quarters here on Britannic. Forecastle deck, though, we can get here quite obviously. All of your windlasses, bollards, and wildcats still accessible here on Britannic, as is the auxiliary anchor. And then, of course, looking back here across the ship. That's cool. Up in the crow's nest, similar space that's accessible here on Britannic that we could get to on Titanic as well. Very cool. But then the rest of this ship, a little bit different from what we see on Titanic. Biggest difference here, these gantry davits. You can see because after the loss of Titanic, obviously the Board of Trade in the United Kingdom said you need to equip more lifeboats. So one of the ways that liners decided to retrofit themselves was via this system called gantry davits, where we could have lifeboats that were stacked on top of each other, and then these davits could pivot outboard and inboard to try and launch these boats if that were ever necessary. And in the case of Britannic in 1916, that was necessary. We do have some traditional davits here, but in general, we're talking about these gantry davits. And Britannic did not have all of her gantry davits fitted. There would have been one more, at very least, fitted here on the port side forward. You can see it's not fitted here. And that was simply because this ship was rushed into wartime service as a warship. Again, this ship sailed as HMHS, His Majesty's Hospital Ship. So she's a warship of the Royal Navy in World War I, and she was lost as a warship of the Royal Navy in World War I. Britannic is a warship in her own right, and she deserves the respect of a warship, in my opinion. But that is the story of Britannic. A couple of differences as well, though. In addition to the lifeboat allotment, you have got this area on sea deck, the well deck. This is open on Titanic and Olympic. Britannic, we go inside here. This is all enclosed, at least partially. So this area where we get into the second and third class areas, this is enclosed on Britannic. You can see this would be a third class area on Titanic. This is all enclosed here on Britannic. And another major difference is we have got this whole structure on the deck house, which does not exist on Olympic or Titanic. That's here on Britannic. Also, this deck house here, this temporary structure, this was a morgue on Britannic. Again, this was a hospital ship, so you will be dealing with the dead and dying. So you will keep the dead back here in the morgue to keep unpleasantries to a minimum until you can either transfer them to shore or bury them at sea, whatever the case may be. We also mentioned on the tour of Titanic the docking bridge. You can see that we do have a docking bridge here on Britannic, but it's sitting a little bit higher than it is on Titanic because we have that deck house underneath. Here it is on Britannic. Same set of controls, same compass, and same telegraphs as well for the tug as well as the engine commands. We've got a telephone system. We don't seem to have the voice tubes, at least not here on the starboard side, nor on the port side. So we don't have the voice tubes, but we do have the telephone system. So we could communicate with the navigation bridge and or the guys running the steering engine down below, which would have been down through this hatch, I do imagine. Back through here, we have got the number 5 and number 4 cargo hatches, as we talked about on Titanic. You can see, though, the tremendous differences in the lifeboat allocations here on Britannic as we had on Titanic. You can see Titanic simply had her lifeboats along the rail here along the starboard and port sides of the boat deck. Britannic had the lifeboats stacked on top of each other. They did get all the boats away on Britannic as they did on Titanic when Britannic struck the mine, which led to her quite premature loss. Another difference here on Britannic, we have got these deck houses here not present on Titanic. The reason for these is this is the area of the grand staircase. You can see the dome here. This deck house was elevator machinery. On Titanic and Olympic, the elevators only went up to A deck. On Britannic, the elevators went up to the boat deck. So the elevator machinery needs to be above the maximum height of the elevators, meaning that you need a deck house. So there it is here on Britannic. Very cool. Otherwise, other things that we can see on this ship, very similar. You can see we've rigged for red in terms of nighttime conditions, so we have got this canvas awning that's covering the well deck. But back here, we have got ourselves the number 1, number 2 cargo hatches. We go up the stairs, back to the forecastle, back to the number 1 cargo hatch and the officers' quarters underneath. Kind of see little hints of that. And then, of course, all the way forward here on Britannic, which is a space that we don't have on Titanic, quite unfortunately. But it's here on Britannic, and it's very, very cool. Otherwise, we've got the A-deck promenade. This is the first-class promenade on Titanic. Here, it has been converted into a hospital space. This is a triage area. You can see we have got hospital beds that go all the way to about amidships here, and then we've got a bulkhead, temporary bulkhead that has been stored here to subdivide this space. If we go outside the ship, and in here, this would be grand staircase. We can't go inside, but that would be grand staircase as you would expect on Titanic or Olympic. But if we then go aft of that bulkhead, which is about here, you then see amidships, same enclosed promenade as you had on Titanic, but not on Olympic. Go inside here, and now you have the empty promenade, basically identical to what it would be on Titanic or Olympic. We don't have the trunked stairwell in this area, but we do have it in this area going up to the first class promenade here on Britannic. You do have a couple of more vents with the Scirocco fans. You have the same compass platform, a couple more chests here in terms of storage of deck equipment, and you've got the compass platform itself. So that's about the same. You also have the trunking here from what would have been the smoking room and the fireplace exhaust up into the third funnel. You can see where it joins up with the third funnel, and then it exhausts out the top. Fourth funnel is the same in terms of being semi-active, not an engine exhaust, but it is a ventilation system. Down here, you have got the ventilation for the engine rooms. So this is a void space that goes all the way down into the center of the ship. Right through here, trying to get a good view of it. It's difficult to see, but that goes all the way down into the center of the ship toward the reciprocating engine room as we have on Titanic. And again, all the way down, there's the top of the reciprocating engines. That's the same here for the fiddly grates. They go all the way down through that void space, through the center of the ship. Turbine engine is down here. And then fourth funnel for general ventilation. So, cool. This game came out in 2020, so this has been a little bit of a formative experience in terms of my updated ability to get through these ships, in terms of what they are and how do you navigate through them. But beyond that, the Britannic should not come as a substitute for Titanic or Olympic, because Britannic, being the last of them built, had some differences in her construction, having learned lessons from Olympic and Titanic, but here it is, as she sailed in 1915 and as she was ultimately lost in 1916, HMHS Britannic, serving her country as a warship, a hospital ship, transporting wounded and dying from mainly Gallipoli in the Dardanelles campaign, trying to get them back homeward bound, but unfortunately she sank on her way back, striking a mine in the Kea Channel off of Greece. But there she is, and you'll see obviously the family resemblance, but again, some critical differences here on Britannic as she sailed. She never served as a passenger liner. Had she done, she would have looked a little bit different, but as we knew her, this is what Britannic was, and obviously you can see the family resemblance to Titanic here. And the final spot of not necessarily correction, but just additional acknowledgement where we need to put things right here is Boiler Room 5. You can see here in one of the coal bunkers, we do have the bunker fire that we talked about. This theory about the bunker fire having caused damage to the outer hull of Titanic has been pervasive in recent years, and it is complete garbage as far as I've been concerned, as far as I have studied the wreck, as far as I have studied the general plans of this space. In boiler room number 5, we have got coal bunkers here. We are actually facing toward midships, and we're looking at the bunker fire here in one of the midships bunkers. This is nowhere near the shell plating of the hull of the ship, which means that there is no way, even in extreme circumstances, that this fire caused any sort of damage to the outer skin of the ship, which, as far as we're concerned, is in this area, heading this way toward that. That's the outboard section of the ship right there. So we are basically midships here, and that's not going to change no matter what, which means that that bunker fire that we took a look at is not going to have any sort of impact one way or another as far as the structural integrity of the outer skin of the ship is concerned. So that theory from this little fire here is complete garbage. And it is just cannon fodder for conspiracy theorists and all sorts of things in terms of the people who proposed this ridiculous idea that there was an insurance scam scheme that was hashed to sink Olympic rather than Titanic, and they swapped the nameplates of the ships before they went to sea, and it's complete garbage. You had the names of each ship embossed into the shell plating, and you can see this still on the wreck that is on the ocean floor. You can see a T and a C in the shell plating that is still there today, and obviously Olympic would not have any reason to have a T in its name, so clearly the ship that's on the bottom of the sea is Titanic, in addition to a whole host of other identifying characteristics. So what you've got there is complete garbage. It is just sensationalism, and unfortunately, I've got to say that this sensationalism has been continually publicized by a couple of rather respectable, otherwise, names, such as the Smithsonian Institution. Smithsonian Magazine, in a 2017 article, talks about a coal fire that may have helped sink the Titanic. And they show you this picture taken of Titanic on April 2nd, 1912. I can confirm it is Titanic because we have the enclosed promenade, and we also have the name Titanic clearly visible there on the forward shell plating of the bow. And they talk about this black streak that's visible on the starboard forward section of the hull, which is nowhere near the iceberg collision, by the way, because the iceberg collision, of course, occurs below the waterline. However, they talk about this little streak that's on the hull, which was probably caused by coaling or bunkering, as it was called at the time, and even called today in terms of fueling a ship. Obviously, coal is dirty and it creates a lot of debris, and you'd get a lot of that debris when you refuel one of these ships. That's what that smudge on the hull is for. However, you will see that they will attribute that marking on the hull to a bunker fire, which has caused severe structural damage to the external hull, and that's clearly why the ship sank. Complete garbage. There is no substantiation to that. If anyone wanted to submit a structural survey talking about how this bunker that was actually closer to the center line of the ship rather than the external hull somehow caused damage to the external hull, I would love to see that, but they can't do it because it is a completely contrived theory. Regardless, that is what you're dealing with when you're talking about a study of the Titanic. But that's what we've got. The bunker fire is replicated here. It is not a reason that the ship sank. It is not any sort of cause for alarm. As I said in the initial video, bunker fires are common on coal-fired ships. They were something that was expected throughout the careers of all of these coal-fired liners, as well as other coal-fired riverboats and things like that, all the way through the 1970s when these things were still in service. At least in terms of riverboats, the last coal-fired ship that I know of, at least, it was most likely converted by this point, but Aquitania, for example, served through the 1950s. She would have had bunker fires, and of course, they were dealt with. But be that as it may, Titanic had a bunker fire, at least one that we know of. There were no ill effects caused by that. I was able to confirm that it was taken care of by the end of the day on April 13th, which means that there was no correlation between that being an active fire and the damage that was sustained to the starboard side via the iceberg collision. However, that's what we've got here. Those are my corrections and addenda to the tour that I did here of Demo 401. I'm sure that some of you have already sent me hate messages because of the, quite honestly, honest mistakes that I made in terms of all of this. Because, again, it's an 882-foot, 45,000-ton ship. It takes a while to get through, and you're going to misspeak, and you're going to forget things in the meantime. But because the internet is what it is, and none of you are accountable for your own words, I feel the need to defend myself. So regardless, that's what I've got here. If you still would like to crucify me, you will be blocked. I don't care. Have a nice day. If you think you can do a better job, go ahead and do a better job, and then I will respect you. But if you're one of those channels with no videos and no subscribers, I don't really care about what you have to say. Until next time, though, for Raribat601 saying thank you all very much for watching, and of course, we will see you soon.